In the previous spoiler, it was mentioned that Luo Feng spent nearly 2 years successfully gathering 2 complete sets of black armor fragments. However, the rarer and more advanced silver fragments remained elusive, where he had collected only a dozen or so, far from assembling a complete suit of armor. Although the silver fragments possessed superior power, Luo Feng chose not to continue purchasing the treasure hunting service in the Starfield scrapyard. The first purchase could still be considered a novelty, holding some entertainment value. However, long-term investment in such endeavors would inevitably draw attention and possibly arouse suspicion. If someone with ulterior motives analyzed surveillance data, it wouldn't be difficult to discover that Luo Feng was deliberately collecting armor fragments. It's crucial to remember that the secret manual, 9 Calamities Secret Tome, which enhances life gene levels, can only be cultivated by a single individual, thus its existence must remain a secret. Moreover, given Luo Feng's current status and position, treasure hunting was essentially just a pastime. While indulging in it briefly was acceptable, prolonged engagement would only waste valuable time and severely impact his cultivation progress. As Luo Feng's bodyguard and also his martial nephew, Dylan naturally wouldn't sit idly by and do nothing. If King Jinyan were to find out, Luo Feng would have an even harder time explaining himself. Additionally, with Luo Feng's current strength, even if he gathered enough silver fragments, he wouldn't be able to fully utilize them. Their effectiveness would actually be lower than that of the black armor. Instead of wasting time searching for equipment that he couldn't yet control, it was far wiser to focus on cultivation and enhance his own strength. After all, the path of cultivation is long. Once he reached the appropriate level of power in the future, he could always resume collecting silver armor fragments. Thus, after obtaining 2 complete sets of black armor, Luo Feng decided to leave the Starfield scrapyard. In fact, compared to the soldier-grade black armor, the general-grade silver armor was vastly more formidable. Once activated, it could unleash a power equivalent to 10,000 pinnacle world master level human, which is 10 times that of the black armor. This level of strength had already reached the pinnacle of Marquis Immortal, even bordering on the King Immortal level. Of course, even the 1,000 times amplification of world master power provided by the black armor was still an immense boost for the current Luo Feng, whose golden horned beast was only at the 6th rank of the world master level. In fact, without the armor, even with various amplification techniques, the golden horned beast could, at best, only unleash about 300 times world master power. However, once the beast reached the peak of the world master level, the black armor's enhancement would become negligible. By then, with the 9 Calamities Secret Tome, the power of the Blood River energy, and various amplification techniques, the golden horned beast would naturally be able to exert around 5,000 times world master power. At that stage, Luo Feng would have no choice but to seek out the silver fragments to prepare for even more intense battles ahead. Now, back to the main storyline. Previously, Luo Feng had spent a massive amount of points purchasing the cultivation manual time-space scribbles, a recommendation from King Jinyan, as well as a soul technique for controlling the Zerg Queen. However, his remaining points were now insufficient to afford the next set of cultivation manuals he needed. Fortunately, every domain master-level member of the Virtual Universe Company is assigned specific tasks to earn points. And Luo Feng was about to undertake the highest-level domain master task. This mission was not only a test of his individual combat strength but also a severe trial of his willpower and mindset. After all, as one's status rises, so do the temptations one faces. If his will wasn't firm enough and his conviction wavered, then he wouldn't be worth the company's investment of vast resources. His position within the Virtual Universe Company would also drop significantly. It's important to understand that those lacking strong willpower and mental resilience are easily manipulated, especially on the extraterritorial battlefield. When faced with life and death situations, they are more susceptible to being swayed by enemy forces, and some even betray the human race to become enslaved souls of other races. If that were to happen, wouldn't it mean that the Virtual Universe Company had wasted an enormous amount of resources nurturing powerhouses for alien races? Such an outcome would be nothing short of an enormous joke. The points-based mission that Luo Feng was about to undertake consisted of 4 interlinked stages. Only by achieving a designated completion rate could he unlock the next stage, otherwise, the entire mission would be terminated. However, this structure was not particularly favorable to the executor, as the completion rate was not determined by explicit rules but rather by the subjective judgment of several universe venerables under the Virtual Universe Company. This meant that Luo Feng's approach and decision-making during the mission could influence the universe venerables' perception, potentially leading to a failed assessment. Luo Feng's first task was to deliver judgment upon the high-ranking members of a certain slave organization within the Qianwu universe country. Since these individuals were engaged in illegal slave trading, Luo Feng had the authority to sentence them to death or impose varying degrees of imprisonment. Luo Feng had always harbored a deep hatred for slavery, and upon acquiring intelligence on these slave traders, including evidence of their crimes which particularly their cruel and inhumane treatment of slaves for profit where his killing intent surged. Based on the intelligence, Luo Feng spent approximately 5 months traveling to one of the strongholds of the slave organization's high-ranking members, Kratch's station planet. Upon arrival, he personally witnessed the atrocities committed by Kratch's subordinates. The most infuriating sight was that merely because a tribal chief had hidden the birth of a planetary-level warrior, he was brutally murdered. Gazing at the countless enslaved natives on the planet, Luo Feng felt deep compassion. Without hesitation, he captured all the involved criminals and used soul-searching techniques. From their memories, he uncovered appalling crimes so heinous they defied description. Without a second thought, Luo Feng sentenced them all to death and personally carried out the executions. Luo Feng's overwhelming power left the surviving planetary-level native in awe, prompting him to beg to follow Luo Feng. However, with his growing cultivation, Luo Feng had long realized that he could not personally protect every victim. His resources and energy were limited, and if he accepted followers without the capacity to manage them properly, it would be an irresponsible act. Moreover, once the Virtual Universe Company took over the planet, with its immense power and wealth, it would no longer allow the slave trade to continue. The planet would be stabilized, the natives would regain their freedom, and life would return to normal. Those who had managed to break through to the planetary level under extreme oppression possessed extraordinary potential. The Virtual Universe Company would assess their strength and talent, providing them with suitable training and resources, which is far more beneficial than merely following Luo Feng. Thus, Luo Feng declined to accept the planetary-level native as a follower and instructed him to wait for the Virtual Universe Company's personnel to arrive. As for Luo Feng himself, he wasted no time and headed directly toward Kratch's location, determined to purge this den of evil completely. Upon detecting Luo Feng and Dylan's arrival, Kratch, who was only at the domain master level, immediately ordered his 5,000 guards and subordinates to scatter in different directions, attempting to blend in and increase his chances of escape. However, Luo Feng unleashed his sword world, forming a barrier that completely sealed off their routes. He then conducted soul searches on nearly 50 star-level warriors on site to extract crucial information, ensuring a fair judgment. After confirming their crimes, Luo Feng released the 5 innocent individuals from the sword world, while all remaining offenders, including Kratch, were sentenced to death. Upon hearing their fate, the criminals desperately attempted to flee, but no matter how they struggled, they could not escape Luo Feng's sword world. What surprised Dylan was that Luo Feng did not simply use the sword energy of his sword world to eliminate the criminals instantly. Instead, he used his claw techniques to tear them apart one by one. Against these primarily planetary-level criminals, Luo Feng, wielding peak domain master strength, could have ended their lives in mere milliseconds. If not for Dylan having long been accustomed to the massacre scenes carried out by his own teacher, King Bloodthirsty, he might have found Luo Feng's method of slaughter unsettling. After all, even among immortals, unless one had a naturally bloodthirsty nature or a twisted soul, prolonged exposure to massacres and bloodshed would cause unease. Yet Luo Feng remained eerily calm, as if the act of killing was nothing more than a routine procedure. In fact, Luo Feng's ability to maintain composure amidst relentless slaughter stemmed from his past experience of soul possession over the golden horned beast. The golden horned beast was inherently bloodthirsty and battle-hungry. If not for Luo Feng's extraordinarily strong will, he would have long been consumed by this primal instinct, losing himself in the endless cycle of slaughter and becoming a mere killing machine. This was precisely why, in addition to the Heavenly Bridge, which tested one's comprehension of the original laws, the Virtual Universe Company had also established the Mirage Sea to temper its members' willpower, demonstrating the critical importance of mental fortitude in cultivation. After sentencing the criminals on this planet and waiting for the Virtual Universe Company's personnel to take over, Luo Feng continued along the optimal route designated by the company, traveling from one planet to another, systematically eliminating the remaining members of the slave organization. Everywhere he passed became a slaughterhouse. Aside from a handful of individuals deemed innocent, nearly all criminals faced execution, resulting in a bloodbath of unprecedented scale. One particular planet had been turned into a veritable hell by the slave organization's higher-ups. The enslaved people were subjected to unspeakable torture, reduced to mere playthings for the powerful elite, suffering inhumanely. Although these aristocrats were not on Luo Feng's designated judgment list, the horrors he witnessed ignited his killing intent beyond control. In the end, he purged them along with the slave organization's criminals, bringing the total number of evildoers slain by his blade to over 1 million. Fortunately, the madness of slaughter did not erode his will. He was still able to calmly judge every perpetrator and ensure that the killings did not extend to the innocent. Even after executing over 1 million criminals, Luo Feng could still leisurely savor a glass of red wine, leaving Dylan at a loss for words. However, in Luo Feng's view, those he killed were all guilty beyond redemption, deserving their demise. The only thing he needed to uphold was his own heart. However, such a bloody scene would likely be cut or adapted again in the animation, just as it was when Luo Feng, in the Qianwu Universe country, led a legion alongside the Golden Horned Race's forces to purge human traitors in a massive slaughter. To avoid excessively cruel and gory visuals on screen, those scenes had been toned down. What do you think? Should the scene of Luo Feng executing criminals with his bare hands be kept in the adaptation? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Returning to the story, seeing that Luo Feng remained steadfast in his heart, unwavering in his will, Dylan paid no attention to how the universe venerables judged his actions or assessed his mission completion. As a warrior who had long been accustomed to war and slaughter, he was thoroughly satisfied with Luo Feng's performance. After all, the universe was filled with bloodthirsty individuals, but what was truly rare was someone who could maintain compassion for the weak amid slaughter, refrain from indiscriminate killing, and yet fear no authority. This quality was the most precious form of resilience on the battlefield. In the extraterritorial battlefield, slaughter was constant. Only those who could maintain unwavering conviction in the face of death threats and never doubt themselves were truly trustworthy warriors. If someone hesitated at the moment of life and death, or worse, feared death itself, they could easily betray the human race, defecting to enemy factions and becoming traitors. Such individuals were like ticking time bombs hidden within humanity. The reason this slave organization was able to run rampant in the Zuilang starfield with such impunity was because its leader, Panchi, was a world master. In the territory of a mid-level civilization, a single world master was enough to rule as king, let alone in an ordinary star system. This was precisely why the slave organization had been able to rise so quickly, growing strong enough to rank among the top 50 forces in the entire starfield. Although Panchi himself had not directly participated in the brutal exploitation and inhumane abuse of slaves, spending most of his time secluded in harsh environments to cultivate and improve himself, Luo Feng still believed that Panchi was the one most deserving of death among the slavers' upper echelon. The reason was simple: Panchi was once a slave himself. He had barely escaped the slavers' grasp before being implanted with a biochip. Originally, he should have been the ultimate victim who despised the slave system the most. However, after breaking through to the universe level, he chose to slaughter the slavers in revenge only to take their place and become the new leader of the slave trade. By relying on the immensely profitable slave trade, he rapidly accumulated vast cultivation resources and eventually grew into a world master level powerhouse. What was even more despicable was that Panchi devoted almost all his time and energy to cultivation, never intervening in his subordinates' atrocities, and even tacitly allowing them to brutalize their slaves. He knew full well how the slave system shattered countless families where he himself had suffered under it, but yet he still chose to walk down this path of evil. In order to secure an endless supply of cultivation resources, he was willing to abandon all morality, becoming the very person he once hated most. Just imagine, his organization had enslaved billions, tearing apart families in numbers beyond comprehension. Thus, Luo Feng sentenced Panchi to death without hesitation, feeling no remorse whatsoever. However, according to Virtual Universe Company's regulations, Luo Feng was not allowed to rely on Dylan or his World Master level guards to assist in capturing Panchi. Having a Domain Master level 9 warrior execute a World Master level 3 powerhouse, only a powerful force like the Virtual Universe Company or the Huge Axe Dojo would dare impose such a brutal trial on their geniuses. Since Panchi spent most of his time focusing on cultivation and was willing to invest heavily in purchasing powerful secret techniques, coupled with his exceptional talent, his combat strength far exceeded that of others at the same level. Although he was only at World Master level 3, his true strength surpassed that of Si Yong, who had already reached World Master level 5 on the Blood River continent. As a result, even when Luo Feng unleashed his most powerful attack, he was still unable to suppress Panchi and gradually began to fall into a disadvantageous position. After all, his comprehension of the original laws was not yet sufficient to bridge the power gap between them. During their battle, Panchi's attacks even shattered Luo Feng's bones. Seeing Luo Feng being forced back repeatedly, Panchi made a decisive move where he summoned a World Master level 9 plant lifeform, hoping to capture Luo Feng and use him as a bargaining chip to escape. However, Luo Feng immediately countered with his Mo Yun Vine. Although the Mo Yun Vine was only at World Master level 6, its superior species quality quickly allowed it to suppress Panchi's low-grade plant lifeform, forcing it into retreat. Sensing that the situation was turning unfavorable, Panchi immediately summoned another plant lifeform, the 9th tier world master level Shaluo flower, to counter Mo Yun Vine. It is worth mentioning that while Mo Yun Vine is renowned for its astonishingly superactive cells, the Shaluo flower is famous for its formidable offensive power and devouring capabilities. Seeing that the battle was tilting against him, Luo Feng promptly ordered Babata to control the Yun Mo spaceship and the automaton ship to launch an assault. It is important to note that the physical toughness of a world master level lifeform is roughly equivalent to E-grade metal, while F-grade metal far surpasses it in hardness. Moreover, the Yun Mo spaceship had undergone secret engravings to reinforce its sharpness, making it incomparably lethal. Under its slashes, the Shaluo flower was as helpless as straw against a scythe, offering no resistance whatsoever. Combined with the relentless bombardment from the automaton ship, Panchi ultimately could not escape his demise. Despite Panchi's death, the fact that he possessed two 9th tier world master level plant lifeforms left Luo Feng with lingering doubts. It was well known that the evolutionary potential of plant lifeforms largely depended on their species. For instance, the low-grade plant lifeform that Panchi had cultivated, even if nurtured with vast resources and under extremely fortunate circumstances, could at most evolve to the domain master level. The mere fact that Panchi had managed to push it to the world master level was nothing short of a miracle. What was even more perplexing was that no matter how lucrative the slave trade was, even if Panchi had sold all his slaves, it would have been utterly impossible for him to amass the necessary resources to support the growth of two plant lifeforms to such a high level. So, what secret was Panchi hiding? Would Luo Feng be able to uncover the mystery? Stay tuned for the next spoiler, where I will reveal the truth to you. Well, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching this video. Wish you a wonderful day.